I think recently, we've all seen some really trash Uber Eats offers. As a matter of fact, in recent months, Uber increased my market's delivery radius to the point where I'm now seeing orders going upwards of 45 miles away. The offers you're looking at right now are terrible, without a doubt, but at what point does an offer tiptoe out of terrible and into the realm of possibly illegal? And no, I'm not talking about Uber Connect, but don't do those either unless you want to end up as somebody's drug mule. In Uber's quest to become profitable, they've done some very detrimental things that negatively impact the drivers. Matter of fact, this was my market's delivery radius, at least until recently. Fast forward to present day, and my market's delivery radius looks more like this. Now, to add insult to injury, they've also gutted the mileage pay. Alright, let's look at part of the screenshot in question. And unless you drive in my market, you're probably not going to see what the issue is. I mean, yeah, obviously the order is upside down, or to put simply, more miles than dollars. Before we go any further in this video, I want to acknowledge the fact that this is an extremely one-off event that the vast majority of you will likely never face. But what I want to focus on is the position that Uber was trying to put the driver in. Alright, enough waiting. Here is the rest of that screenshot. Any guesses what that line going across it is? If your guess was the US-Canadian border, you'd be right. Before we go any further, I want to give you a little bit of background on myself, because after all, who doesn't enjoy talking about themselves? My mom is Canadian, and therefore that entitles me to dual citizenship. So I mean no disrespect to any Canadians watching this video. I'm simply trying to explain why things are the way that they are here. A. British Columbia, the province that borders me to the north, is substantially more expensive than Washington state. So, the Canadians flock down here in droves to buy up all the gas and the milk and to congest the Trader Joe's parking lot. Now, with all that said, the Canadians being down here is a win-win because they contribute a huge amount to the local economy. But there are certain laws about what they can purchase down here and bring back into Canada. I want to pop that screenshot back up. There's something that it fails to mention. There are some things that are legal there that are illegal here, and vice versa. This specific order was picking up at Lowe's. Now, Lowe's sells a wide variety of shit, including some chemicals that may be banned in Canada. Then there's also the issue of taxes, or if you're crossing a border, the rather funny word, duty. What do you think the chances are that Uber collected duty from the customer and notified the border? If I had to take a very sarcastic stab in the dark, I'd say that the odds were probably less than 50-50. Something else the offer screen failed to mention is, oh, I don't know, you might need a freaking passport to get into the country. Either that or an enhanced license. Let me know in the comments if you've ever crossed the border into Canada or Mexico. Border waits are something that I would like to put a lot of emphasis on. While it is possible to drive right up to the border, it's also just as likely that you could end up waiting hours to talk to immigration. And I know this because it's happened to me several times. Let's look at that offer again. $14 for 27 miles. I mean, any rational driver is just going to decline it right there. But can you imagine if some poor driver did accept it and then ended up having to wait in a border lineup for 3 hours? And let us not forget, there's the return trip, where you could run into the exact same shit you just did. Can you imagine just how frustrating it would be to run into any of the following scenarios? Waiting in a line that long only to be turned around because you didn't have your passport on you. How about getting to the checkpoint only to find out that what you have in the car isn't legal in Canada? And finally, there's also the possibility that you could find out that you have to pay tax on the item that the customer ordered, therefore making an already undesirable order even worse. Now, for those of you out there who are particularly stubborn and you think you're just going to refuse to answer the questions and deny them access to your vehicle, good luck with that. Your American constitutional rights do not protect you at a Canadian border crossing. Actually, come to think of it, they don't protect you at an American border crossing either. My point is, you had better not lie to them. And if you want to know why I'm smiling right now, stick around to the end of the video and I'll tell you a true story. The title of this video is, Did Uber Eats ask me to break the law? And the honest answer to that question is, I don't know. At absolute best, it would become extremely convoluted on who pays tax where and when. And then you better hope you're not crossing the border with anything illegal. At worst, you get arrested and charged federally. Stick around to the end of the video. The offer we've been looking at is an offer that I personally received here in my market. But I want to segue, and I want to look at an experiment a driver in my market named John did not too long ago. And actually, I want to tell a story about John too, so stick around to the end for that as well. John does both rideshare and delivery. He decided out of sheer curiosity to map the route that Uber would give him between my city of Bellingham and a place called Point Roberts. It's important to note that Point Roberts is in Washington State in my county. That will be relevant later. But there is something incredibly unique about this specific town. Actually, as a matter of fact, after you're done watching this video, it's probably worth a quick Google search because I don't know of anywhere else like it in the world. Even though Point Roberts is in Washington State in my county, you have to drive to the Canadian border, drive up into Canada, and back down into Washington State. Basically, in order to access this town from anywhere else in Washington State, you have to cross the border twice. Whoever was doling out territories on the map really fucked that one up. Now, I don't know if this is true, but word has it, due to the two international borders, this is a popular destination for people in witness protection. There I go outing them on the internet. All right, let's get back to John's experiment. He was curious at the route that Uber would suggest to get to this town. The results were pretty funny. Most of us have heard of UberX, Uber XL, Uber Black, stuff like that. But have you ever heard of Uber drive your car through the fucking ocean? Well, now you have. Once again, we have a trip summary screen that does not give anywhere near enough information. Sure, technically, the start and end destinations are in the same county, but on this short trip, you'll get to experience the wildly diverse scenery that two different countries have to offer. But of course, you're going to need a passport. And oh yeah, that's not mentioned anywhere, is it? Now, I realize that this video is full of questions and not so many answers. But there's something that I want you to take away from this. With Uber offers getting worse and worse and them continuously proving that they're willing to put drivers in questionable situations, don't be a fucking guinea pig. Sometimes the money is just not worth the bullshit. Keep in mind, Uber does not have an acceptance rate requirement to jump online whenever you choose to. Use that decline button liberally, because if you don't, you might find yourself in a situation that you just don't know how to handle. What do you guys think? Is that offer even legal? Be sure to let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, leave your theories on which country I made the money in and which country I owe the taxes to. I mean, seriously, could you imagine getting audited by a country that you're not even a resident of? That order was a clusterfuck waiting to happen. All right, for those of you who stuck around to the end, thank you. Let's get into those couple of stories I promised. Here is why you do not lie to Border Patrol. Now, this is not my story. It's my dad's story, but I have permission to tell it. Like I mentioned towards the beginning of this video, my mom is Canadian. When my parents were first married, my mom was still living in Canada. So my dad used to have to cross the border on a regular basis, or my mom would come down to the States and visit my dad. So they were still working on the paperwork, so that's just the way it was. It's worth mentioning that my dad was active duty military for 20 some odd years, and this was true even back then. So my dad had been up over a long weekend visiting my mom in Vancouver, or Canada. We'll just go with Canada. I don't know exactly where it was, and it doesn't matter for the sake of this story. So the weekend wraps up, and my dad was going on deployment. So for those of you who weren't around, military or raised in a military family or whatever, deployment is basically where they send a service member somewhere else in the world for any period of time that they choose. It just so happened that my dad was driving my mom's car. Now, my mom's car was registered in British Columbia, so it was Canadian registered, not American. So my dad goes pulling up to the border crossing, and he tells them that he is heading back down to the States and he's about to go on deployment. And they tell him he cannot cross the border because he's driving a car that's registered in Canada. So my dad obviously doesn't have time to figure out how to fix this specific situation. So instead, what he does is go to another border crossing. Now keep in mind, this is before I was even born. So he gets to this other border crossing. Now, my dad is from the Midwest, and according to my mom, had a bit of a twangy accent back then. So he goes pulling up to this border crossing, and when they ask him his nationality, like they always do, his response was, Canadian. My dad quickly found himself handcuffed to a chair in an interrogation room at Border Patrol. So they ended up pulling his records and finding out exactly who he was. And then eventually some investigator came in the room and said, why'd you lie? He, fortunately for his sake, was honest that time and said, look, man, I just have a freaking plane that I have to catch. I'm deploying, I'm military, so on and so forth. They handcuffed him, probably read him the riot act about never lying to Border Patrol, and they sent him on his way. He barely made that flight. And when I say barely, they were working on raising the stairs as he was hauling ass to the plane. So, never lie to Border Patrol. All right, the second story that was promised was about a driver named John. Now, John is awesome. I've gotten to talk to him over Instagram a few times since this event. So if you're not following me on Instagram, it's just @ZachDrivesFast. But anyway, I digress. So I decided that I was going to take my mom and my son out for lunch. So we all meet at my place and we walk into town. We have lunch, but actually, let me back up a little bit. Before actually getting into the area that we were eating in, I had like twisted my ankle or something. And I was kind of like hobbling. Now, my son loves to keep me humble. I'll show him a really cool thumbnail I had spent hours working on, and he'll be like, meh, it's okay. I'll show him a video I spent 2 days editing, and he's like, wow, Dad, you really suck at this. So obviously he's just bantering with me, and it's his way of being lovable. But to give you an idea of how my kid and I interact, it's like that. So we were wrapping up our meal, and because I had twisted my ankle, like, I'm not gonna walk back, especially being fat and full and a couple margaritas deep. So we decide to summon an Uber. So my son and I are, while we're waiting on this Uber to show up, we're going back and forth, just bantering with each other. And I made a crack. Somebody's going to eat me alive in the comments for this, but I really was joking. I was joking. And I said, so, how does it feel to have a famous dad? And he's like, oh, shut up, Dad. Nobody knows who you are, right? And, you know, like I said, he's keeping me humble. So the Uber pulls up, and my mom and my son pile in the back, and I hop into the passenger side. And so we were driving for maybe 30 seconds before this gentleman, John, looked over at me and he goes, "You're Zach." Like, yeah. Like, you know, I mean, because like my name is, you know, on his app, right? So I didn't think anything of it. He's like, I've been subscribed to you since you were at like 1,000 subscribers. And my son's jaw hit the floor. We had literally just gotten done having a conversation about how nobody knows who I am. And the very next person that we interact with was a rideshare driver who knew who I was. So I love that story. Shout out to John. You made me look like a legend in front of my kid, and I owe you a drink, my friend. So I love that. I love telling that story. It never gets old. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. If you haven't done so yet, please do consider pressing the like button and subscribing to my channel. My name is Zach. Take care.